Hello and welcome to today's daily news analysis. So today is 23rd of March 2022. We are covering the Hindu newspapers Delhi edition. Now, as part of our initiative, I make it a point to share questions for mains answer writing practice, and you can get your answers evaluated for free. So 2 answers every week. Now I have a question on one topic, the very first topic that was there in the news. So in this topic, I am asking you a question. And thereon, my focus has been more towards the pre-aspect. Okay. Now getting on with the first topic. So the parliament started, parliament was functioning, and there was an outcry. Opposition parties were critical of the increase in the fuel prices that has taken place. Right? We all know that the fuel prices have increased. The LPG prices have increased. And therefore, there was disruption in both the Lok Sabha as well as Rajya Sabha. The parliament has two houses, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Now, we all know that the international prices have gone up because of the war that is going on. And before that also, the fuel prices were actually increasing. We import the oil, we do not have it within the country. So if anything happens in the world, it will affect the supply. And if the supply is diminished, then naturally the price of the fuel will increase. So this was a given. This was to happen. Now the economists believe that actually we can expect that the fuel prices may go even further. They may increase by rupees 9 to rupees 12 per liter of diesel and petrol respectively. And furthermore, this complicates the situation. If the fuel becomes expensive, naturally fuel is required for a lot of things, for production related activities, for transportation of things. So if fuel expenses increase or the cost of raw material increase, naturally the inflation will also increase. And we already know that the inflation level is upwards of 6%. So the 6% criteria was the upper limit. The inflation target is actually 4% plus minus 2%. So we are breaching the 6% limit already. We are expecting that the RBI should do something about this situation. And now we have that the fuel prices will further increase. So if the fuel prices further increase, it will lead to overall inflation in the economy. And that is the question. The fate of the Indian economy is intricately linked with global crude prices. Fine. So whatever happens, the fate of the Indian economy is dependent on the global crude prices. What measures can India take to address this issue? Now you can see the fate of the Indian economy, first of all, with reference to inflation. Right? Things become more expensive. If things become more expensive, and when we refer to the when we refer to this thing also, inflation, then it means one of the reasons for the high fuel prices is the government imposing more taxes on fuel. So tax is a great source of revenue for the government. So government is getting revenue, and we all know because of the pandemic, in particular the pandemic, the fiscal deficit is very, very high. Right? It is upwards of 6%. I can't just recall the fact. 6.9% is the fiscal deficit. That is, government is spending more than what it is earning. And a part of the earning, and significant part of the earning, is coming from the taxes on fuel. So it is undermining this. So it will undermine the government's overall ability to raise revenue, and then raise revenue and spend on welfare or whatever the government wants to do. So you can see in multiple ways how the fate of the Indian economy is intricately linked. Now, how about when things become more expensive, the raw materials become expensive, naturally, it affects the competitiveness of the industry. It affects the competitiveness. If inflation increases, it may lead to things becoming more expensive. It will affect the end consumer at the end of the day. It may also lead to impoverishment. Okay, when the global crude prices are increasing, since we are importing crude, we are buying it from our dollars, the foreign reserves that we have, we are spending that, and then we are getting crude. So that means our current account deficit will also increase. So you can see in multiple fronts, the fate of our economy, Indian economy, is intricately linked to global crude prices. In fact, in the business section today, there was an article which said that because of this war-induced crude prices, the inflation that is taking place, it may push the world back into recession. Because of the pandemic, naturally there was a recession-like situation. So because of this, again, because of the shock due to the crude prices, supply of fuel, again we will have recession-like situation in the entire world. Now, what can the government do to address this issue? What can we do about this? Well, at this present moment, we are looking at having waivers, right? We are looking at alternate sources of fuel. So Iran is under the sanctions of USA. Then Russia is also under sanctions. So we are looking forward to having waivers so that we can get energy at a preferable rate. So we are looking that. So that should improve the supply and thereby help reduce the inflation. Okay, so waiver from exemptions. Next, what we can do is the government is working on ethanol blending. So government says that ethanol, a kind of alcohol, so it is combustible, so it can be mixed with fuel. In fact, I have a video on ethanol blending also, ethanol blending policy of our country. So 20% of blending can be done, and ethanol is something that can be produced from any organic thing. So it can be made from there. So it will be beneficial. Then obviously we need to transition. We are primarily petrol, diesel, etc. is being used by the automobiles, and automobiles can run on electricity, EVs. So we need to promote EVs, and EVs need electricity. Now electricity can come from renewable means. So there are certain alternate ways by which we can rectify the situation. In fact, even when we refer to the LPG now, we can work on inductions. So inductions are there these days. So that is again running on electricity, and electricity can be on any means. Okay, one more thing that I missed out, that is we need to have strategic reserves. Now this is a pre-assignment for you. Which all places in our country we have strategic reserves. So strategic reserves means that we store oil. We keep storing oil, especially when the global crude prices are less. And when the fuel prices are high, at that time we can use the reserves that we have. And again, when the prices come down, we start importing. So that is something that we can do. We need to augment our strategic reserves. I think it should be at 90 days. That is the target. 90 days of fuel should be there within the country in the strategic reserves. Sri Lanka Tamil families flee to India. Okay, what is happening in Sri Lanka? Why are they fleeing? So basic issue over here is that you may know that earlier Sri Lanka's foreign minister had come to our country, and they said that, see, we are under a financial stress. We have borrowed lot of money. We have borrowed lot of money from other countries, and which is that other country which is giving loans? China. China is giving loans at a very, very high rate of interest. So Sri Lanka not able to afford, they want to invest in infrastructure and all those things. Every country wants to do that. But for that, they were borrowing money, borrowing at unsustainable rates. And now they are not able to return the money. So they are on the verge of bankruptcy. And I would say they are bankrupt. So they are on the verge of bankruptcy. So they do not have any foreign reserves. They do not have dollars like we have for importing crude. So what has that led to? That has led to supply shortage. Many things a country does not generate by itself. They basically import. In fact, in yesterday's news, there was that the school exams are not taking place in Sri Lanka because there is shortage of paper. So items of basic necessities, something that we take for granted, is not available because of this situation over here. So because of the bankruptcy, the supply is not coming and therefore the people are suffering. Now, northern side of Sri Lanka is having Tamil population. So they decided, okay, fine, enough is enough. Our life is very, very difficult. We are going out and we are reaching out to India. So they attempted to reach out to India, right? So you can see this is the closest actually, and this is the point Dhanush Kondi. It's believed that the last road is basically stretching till Dhanush Kondi, and there is a U-turn type of thing, right? And this is very, very shallow. Ram Setu area also. So it's very, very shallow, and they somehow managed to come over here, right? The distance is hardly 12 kilometers. Okay, so they came over here, and in the process they were caught, or they were taken into custody. They were spotted by the Coast Guard patrol. So they were seen and they were taken into custody, and here we have them. Clear? Dhanush Kondi is mentioned over here, and it is in the coastal Rameshwaram region. And where is this? Tamil Nadu. And they said that they left the country due to rising prices of essential goods, lack of jobs. Now you can see Sri Lanka fuel crisis is also going on, because obviously paper is not there. What about the fuel? Fuel is anyways coming imported only. Now when we have Coast Guard, let's look at the Coast Guard also. So Coast Guard is essentially, we have, in the Defense, Ministry of Defense, it is coming under the MOD. Parent agency is Ministry of Defense, and Ministry of Defense has the Army, it has the Navy, Air Force, and later on one more agency was added, that is the Indian Coast Guard, right? Indian Coast Guard is there. And how did it came into existence? It was felt that we need to patrol our borders, maritime borders. So we need to, this is India, this is the maritime territory, right? It's virtual territory basically. So we need to patrol that. There may be an imminent threat, there may be smuggling, there may be terrorists that is trying to attempt, like the Mumbai terror attacks. So an agency was created by an act of the parliament. Therefore, this is a statutory body. They have boats, etc. They also have 67 aircrafts. Tamil Nadu yet to install critical instruments at Mullaperiyar Dam. Okay, what we really need to know is, this dam thing we're not interested. We are interested in the Mullaperiyar Dam, which incidentally lies in seismic zone 3. So what does this mean? It is in a seismic area, and in fact dams, because they store a lot of water, right? Imagine a place has a lot of water, and suddenly the water, if sudden movement of water takes place, it may lead to seismicity, it may lead to earthquake like situation. And this is anyways, seismic zone 3 means it is a vulnerable area, right? There are, I think, seismic zone 5 and 6, that is the last. So it is in seismic zone 3. Now Mullaperiyar Dam is located in the state of Kerala. So why Tamil Nadu is being talked about? So during the British Raj, Mullaperiyar Dam, the control over the dam, was given on lease for 999 years. That means perpetual. Imagine 999 years. This was given on lease to the state of Tamil Nadu, right? So this was given for what purpose? So that they construct a dam over here, and the water can be sent to the arid areas along this basin, right? Dry areas, there is a lot of water over here, you can see this, and from here it can be given over here. So even though it is in the state of Kerala, the administration of this is under the custody of the state of Tamil Nadu. So what is the state of Kerala saying? And this is often in news. Kerala is saying that, see, this is in a seismic zone area, it's earthquake prone, and Tamil Nadu is not sharing with us key data. They are also not telling us, this is not covered in this article, but they are also not telling us as to when and how they are releasing water. So they went to the Supreme Court also for this purpose, and the Supreme Court said that see, you should give them data, you should tell them as to how you are using the water. You should take the other state into confidence, all of this. Else we will hold the Chief Secretary of Tamil Nadu accountable. Chief Secretary, the most senior most bureaucrat in the state of any state of the country. Okay, what instruments have to be what to be put? So to measure earthquake or to measure seismicity. Seismicity is indication of the waves or the movement of the earth. So that is done by seismometers and accelerometers, right? Basic understanding, just that they measures the change in acceleration. Actually, it is to do with the movement of the earth. So seismometers and accelerometers. And seismometer, I think you must have studied in geography also. Seismographs, seismicity, these terms you must have come across. Okay. Now Mulla Periyar Dam, as you can see, and as you can see from the name itself, it is having, dam is something which stores water, right? So it is on the banks of Periyar river, so water that is coming from Periyar river, and you can see the name also is there. And the other river is Mullayar river, right? So these two rivers, waters from these two rivers are stored. Now this is not shown in the map, it may not be as big as the Periyar river. And the Periyar river is also known as the lifeline of the state of Kerala. Clear? Now coming on to the opinion section. This was interesting actually, I couldn't overlook this. Needed an Indian legislative service. But I'll go beyond the article also. I have to go, this is important. Okay. So he's Mr. Vinod Bhanu, who's basically a research person. He's working with the Center for Legislative Research and Advocacy. Right. So he says that we should have a dedicated Indian legislative service, just like we have the IAS, IPS. We are also talking about the Indian Judicial Service, etc. Why? That is a big question. Why? So basically he's saying that, see, in our country, like we have the parliament, the legislative bodies. So in the parliament there is the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. There are two houses. And likewise, there are state legislative assemblies also. Then there are panchayati institutions also. So they are all legislative bodies. And what does the legislature do? Legislature, first of all, legislature, what does it do is, it forms laws, it makes laws, it discusses and deliberates issues of national importance or importance of the state or something that is important. So it discusses, it deliberates on issues, and above all, it is in a parliamentary polity, its task is to have a watch over what the executive is doing. So it keeps a watch on the executive's administrative behavior, right? So keeping the executive under check. We have the 0 hour, we have the question hour. The parliament, if a government wants any money, it has to come from the parliament itself. It's coming in, I think it's mentioned in Article 110 of the Constitution. So anything, it is, the control is with the parliament, and executive is also there in the office, in the Council of Ministers, till the time they enjoy the confidence of the legislature. Right. So till now it's fine. Now what he's saying is, when Mr. Vinod Bhanu is saying is, and this is quite legitimate, says that the people who are working in the legislature, one is the MPs, MLAs, etc., who were voted by the people. So they are obviously legislators. Now that is there, but the staff or the administrative machinery that is there, that is typically comprising of, especially the most important people like the Secretary General. So those people are typically retired civil servants, sometimes from the service also. So we have people from the executive who are working in the legislature. So there is a dependence on the executive for legislative works, legislative tasks. Tomorrow it may happen that legislature says that we want to do a research on something and executive says, no, you can't do. Something that is critical of the government, no, you can't do. That may happen. So what he's recommending is that we need to have a dedicated Indian legislative service that is under the control of the legislature, that is separate and distinct from the executive, so that the control of the executive is not there, right? That is the idea. Because when I say that, when I gave you the example that the executive may feel that something is critical, so they may not support the legislature, or they may not provide them the resources. So this is a situation of conflict of interest. And the point that I shared is actually a discussion that was made during the during the time when the Constituent Assembly was meeting. So it is part of the debate actually. So there is the issue of the conflict of interest. So this is what this article is basically saying. Now I'll add a few more dimensions to this thing. Few more dimensions. That is, when our legislative work is going on, if we compare it with US or any other country, there is very little effort on research work, on the scrutiny work. So we need to have some sort of a cadre that has good command over the legislative work, right? Again, the executive, the people who have come from the executive, they may not have the complete command over the process or the procedures of the legislature. It happens. So it undermines the functioning of the legislature. Imagine somebody comes to your office and your boss doesn't know much about your office, what all is happening. And you may have seen this also, that the junior person is telling the senior person as to what all they have to do. Right? So this is it. So yes, so coming back, research work, research on legislative businesses, research on the issues that are going on. So that support is also required, and our country is not investing in that. So maybe you can add this, another dimension to this thing is that having a legislative service could also improve the quality of legislations, the quality of discussions and deliberations that happen in the legislature. And this legislature is both the parliament at the state level as well as at the panchayat level and municipalities, etc. Now we have one example of, we have borrowed the Westminster system, we have borrowed the British system, and in Britain itself there is a system that is, it reads in the United Kingdom, the clerk of the House of Commons. The House of Commons is basically the Lok Sabha that we have. So something similar to that. So clerk of the Lok Sabha of the House of Commons has always been appointed from the legislative staff pool. But in India's context, that is not taking place, and that needs to be reformed. Okay. Now the context is basically the vice president of a country who happens to be the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha, right? That is in the polity. So he had appointed Dr. PPK Ramacharyulu, right? So he was appointed, and this person was always working with he was from the staff of the parliament, of the House, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. So that person itself was made the Secretary General. Right? That person was made the Secretary General. But maybe because of pressure, in a very short span of time, in few months, less than 3 months, it was replaced by a former bureaucrat, PC Moody. So this actually triggered the views of the author over here. But I don't expect, maybe yes, there can be a question on as to why should we have the Indian Legislative Service. I think I'll add this, I'll share a question in the community section, right? So I'll post it over there. A blow to equitable access to essential medicines. So what is the blow? So I think I'll just give you a context over here. I don't want to go deep into this because this is obviously something has already happened, and UPSC doesn't ask you in that way, right? If something is going to happen, then they ask you questions in the mains paper, and there is too much time for that. Okay. So see, in the world, trade is taking place. There is movement of goods. There is movement of service. So for goods and service, whatever trade is taking place across the world, some set of rules has to be there so that coordination takes place, cooperation takes place amongst the world countries, else one country may have a policy that is detrimental to the other country. So that has to be done. So free trade has to be promoted, right? So that is the idea. Goods and services are covered in this thing, and for goods we have the general agreement on trade and tariffs, GATT, that is there. Likewise, we are negotiating on the services. Now there is one more dimension that we may have concern globally, and that is of the intellectual property rights. And when we talk about the intellectual property rights, of particular importance is the pharmaceutical sector. So consider the situation over here. Most of the pharmaceutical companies that you may have heard of is coming from the developed countries, US, etc. They are making new drugs, new medicines, medical equipments, right? So they are doing all this, and they are able to do this by investing in research and development. They are getting approvals, series of tests are going on. It's very, very expensive. So all that innovation that is taking place, so naturally somebody has done it, and it should not be that some other country or some other company, since the product is already out, starts using it and develops it at a lower cost. So that is a disincentive for creativity and knowledge sector, and that would mean that new drugs, new medicines, there is lack of incentive in developing something new, basically. Right, so that is that can be within the country, and that can be across the world also. So what happens is, typically the people who have innovated, they get some sort of a protection. Maybe they get monopolistic right that if that thing has been developed, they maybe have a right to sell that product or service for at least 20 years. Nobody can copy that. Some sort of protection in that. Or they may get royalty from any other company who borrows this intellectual property, right? So that takes place. Now in this context over here in the pharmaceutical sector, we have India, for instance. So in Indian context, we say that these companies, they are trying to be monopolistic, and they are trying to, obviously they want to fleece as much money as possible, they want to raise as much capital as possible, they want to take advantage of this monopolistic rights. Nobody else can make this. So this affects availability of drugs, essential medicines. It affects accessibility. You go to the shop and you are able to get it. And affordability. The drugs may be very, very expensive. And this is a human rights issue, especially for the poorer sections. Don't they have the right to get fine, get treated? Is it only the domain of the rich? So those ethical questions arise because of this. So thereby some sort of exemptions are provided in this regard. Right, so in this regard, some sort of an exemptions are provided by the WTO, and that exemption is coming from the Doha Agreement that took place in 2001. So Doha Agreement basically says that in interest of accessibility of certain equitable access to essential medicines, compulsory licensing can be done. So now I am introducing the concept of compulsory licensing. Right, so licensing. So what does this mean? This means that if a particular company, let's say they have the patent and they are unwilling to share the patent. So if somebody, voluntarily they negotiate two different companies, but if they are unwilling to share, or if the drugs are very, very expensive or it is not available, then in that case, compulsory licensing can be done. But some procedure has to be followed. else if anybody will be able to do it. And in India's case, India has made a law known as Indian Patents Act that provides for compulsory licensing, provided the companies tried or the drugs are not available. So under certain scenarios, it can be done. Clear? Compulsory licensing, this concept over here. And if you have a doubt, you can always mention in the comment section. Now with reference to the pandemic, now coming to the article, naturally we need new medicines are coming up, new drugs are going to come up, vaccines are already there. We may need new medical equipments also, and they have to be at a cheaper price. All these medicines that are there, diagnostics, etc., they're very, very expensive, prohibitively expensive. So to improve that, to make it affordable, to make it accessible, given the disease of COVID-19, or now recently the surge of infections has also taken place in China also, we need to do something about it so that the entire world or the entire humanity that is there, or we can have an integrated approach to the healthcare, that every country has equitable access to these essential medicines, vaccines, etc. So India, alongside South Africa and certain other countries, they went to the WTO. They said, you remember there is something known as TRIPS? Yes, we remember, and the TRIPS is for protecting the intellectual properties. Why are you coming to us? See, the pandemic is there and we need all this support. So in light of this, we need a waiver. We need a waiver from the TRIPS with reference to the medicines, with reference to all the things that are required to cure or treat a person. Clear? So waiver for compulsory licensing. So compulsory licensing can be allowed, should be allowed given the seriousness of this situation. So this thing will come up at the WTO. They were discussing in their assembly, health assemblies in the WHO actually. So they were discussing this issue, and nothing happened. There was a deadlock, right? So nothing happened. So it is a blow to equitable access. Anyways, so, and here again, remember something: developed nations, developed countries will not like to compromise on TRIPS. In fact, they will actually like to improve the TRIPS. So they keep trying and finding ways of increasing the protections to the intellectual property rights, because they profit because of this. And likewise, countries like India, who want equitable access, where there is the issue of poverty, we want affordable healthcare, we would negotiate on relaxation of IP norms. So in this case, we have something known as EU solution. So EU said, okay, fine, you can have it, we can have you permission of compulsory licensing. Only one thing is there. That it will be available for only vaccines. And only certain members will be eligible for this. We cannot give access to our technology to any country. So for instance, EU has provided, and one more, this is COD. But in COD, India is not, India is member of this, but only the 3 countries, US, Australia and Japan. So they have also provided a solution, and both of them are very similar. So both of them are saying it is only for vaccine and not for other things, right, that we can do. And they have set an eligibility criteria also. And because of this eligibility criteria, it excludes a large number of countries who may be pharmaceutical powerhouses. It doesn't affect India as much, but who may be important from the point of view of this thing, like Bangladesh, but they will not be able to get access to these medicines. And China has also been excluded. Basically, it says that a country that has been exporting less than $10 billion, I can't place it in the article, somewhere here only. So, sorry, a 10% or something that has less than 10% of world exports, right? So China has more than 10%, so China is excluded. Now Bangladesh does not have significant exports, so in that case they are also out. So it doesn't affect India because India is nowhere close to that 10% figure. Right, so that this is the basic context of this article over here. Basically, we have to look at the TRIPS issue I wanted to discuss, compulsory licensing, and the Indian Patents Act. J&K budget opposition slams taxation without representation. Basically, Jammu and Kashmir is a union territory, and as you know, in our country, in a parliamentary polity, the government or the executive can get budget, can get finances only with the sanction of the legislature. In this case, in the centre's case, it is parliament, or it can be the state legislative assembly. There is no other way that the government can get money. So it is the principle of democracy, and this principle, taxation without representation, was given by an American lawyer, James Otis. Actually, you can quote this, you can note this. So taxation without representation is tyranny. So that during the American Revolution, the British were ruling over America, and but the Americans did not have a say on the taxation matters. Naturally, America was a colony of Britain at that time. So that time they said that taxation without representation of whom? Americans is a tyranny. Now this is what the Congress or the opposition members are basically saying. Now see, Jammu and Kashmir was a state, now it has become a union territory, and for union territory, the budget etc. is voted upon by the parliament because it is a territory of the center, union territory, right? So it is by the parliament. So that is what it is saying, that there is a lack of representation of the center over here. So that is what they are condemning over here. So the debate was going on the Jammu and Kashmir appropriation bill. Furthermore, they are saying that even before the invocation of the abolition of Article 370, the democracy in the state of Jammu and Kashmir has been restricted, has been suspended. You can remember all the lockdowns and the bans that have taken place ever since 2016. Right, the Burhan Wani incident that had taken place, pellet gun controversy that had taken place. So a lot of violence had taken place, and there was almost curfew-like situations that were there. Okay, so this was done. Now a critique of the budget by a former minister of the UPA government. So this government has said, BJP government, the finance minister had said that the GST revenue is projected to double in 1 year. How can it get double in 1 year? How can what is GST? Whenever we buy something, we pay some tax, that is GST. So GST will double. That means the production in the economy will also double in a way, loosely saying. The sales in the country will double. The value of goods and services that are made in country will double. That sounds good, but that is not possible. It is unprecedented. So that is what it is saying. And furthermore, the government has said that we will restrict the fiscal deficit to 6.4%. But it depends upon the government's ability to sell state PSUs. So you're spending the capital of the country and financing the revenue side, revenue expenditure. So you're not creating any new assets. So that is not good economics, right? But we also live in difficult circumstances at this point of time. FTA talks expected during Israel Prime Minister's visit. Okay, there was an article, editorial actually, mounting pressures. So mounting pressure on India, right? So a series of prime ministers etc. are coming into our country on very short notice. So now Israeli Prime Minister will come from April 3 to 5, and I'll give a question on India-Israel relationship is important. De-hyphenation of Israel-Palestine relationship, that is again important. So the key agenda is going to be free trade agreement, and what they are saying is that, see, our cooperation is primarily on defense, then on cyber security, high-tech solutions basically, even agriculture. We need to widen our relationship to include other things. And by the way, when I said critical technologies, right, cyber technologies, do remember NSO's Pegasus spyware. I have videos on this, you can just check on the net. Report lays stress on digital skills training. Now this is important, digital skills training. Yeah. So basically a report is there, and this is by a private agency, Alpha Beta, prepared by Alpha Beta and commissioned by the AWS. Right, it's not from the government, that is what we are concerned about from our exam. Okay, so they are saying that about 27.3 million workers, representing 7% of the country's workforce, will require digital skills training. Simple. So 7% of our country's workforce requires digital skills training. And furthermore, because of the COVID-19 situation, digitalization, etc., we need to go digital, and for that skills are required. And certain skills have been mentioned, like people working in cloud developer tools, online collaboration, accounting, customer relations management software. So these are most in-demand skills. Now I have something for you from Prelims perspective as to what all government is doing for digital skills training. So first of all, we have a scheme known as Digi Saksham. Digi Saksham. So Saksham again means making somebody Saksham, capable. This is for employability, increasing the employability of youth. Then we have something known as National Skill Qualification Framework. And in this, digital skilling has been emphasized upon. Then Ministry of Education has started an initiative known as Yukti. Let me speak Hindi. किसी व्यक्ति को उपयुक्त युक्त करना, ठीक है? So enabling somebody. Yukti 2.0 by Ministry of Education, which was actually earlier known as Ministry of Human Resource. Then with partnership with IBM company. So we have an initiative known as Skill Build Reignite. So Reignite. And for healthcare workers, the government is focusing on too much of, they should actually, on telemedicines, etc., digimedicines. And the idea of this is that the medicines, the consultations, etc., should be available to every person, every nook and corner of a country. And every nook and corner is not living in an urban area, and they are not skilled, definitely. So we have an initiative known as e-Sanjeevani for teleconsultations, digimedicine, etc. But people don't know how to use it. But we do have auxiliary healthcare workers, ASHA, etc. So they need to be skilled to become an interface between the people and the doctors, etc., healthcare providers. So e-Sanjeevani. Most of Ganga Clean claims Jal Shakti Ministry. Okay, so this is basically with reference to something to do with the parliament. So Minister of State is saying that Minister of State for Water Resources, which is also known as Jal Shakti Ministry. So he's saying most of Ganga is clean. We have done considerable amount of work under the Namami Gange and National River Conservation Plan. Now this is important for okay. Then how can the ministry say that, see, everything is fine, everything is very clean? So they're saying basically there are certain parameters on which we can say that the river is clean. Naturally, there has to be certain parameters, there has to be certain set of standards. So first one is dissolved oxygen. Next is biochemical oxygen demand, and other is fecal coliform. Okay, let me come to this thing. Let me first cover biological chemical oxygen demand. Imagine if there is more waste being discharged in, be it organic waste, be it any waste that is being discharged in the water, be it sewage also. So that waste will be further decomposed by the microorganisms that are there in the water. Something will be there that will play a role. So that will disintegrate the organic matter that is being supplied into the water by sewage, etc. So what happens here? Basically, carbon gets oxidized with oxygen and the thing becomes clean. So for anything, for all that organic thing is there, we need to have oxygen in the water. So if the biochemical oxygen demand is high, if more oxygen is demanded, that means there is more waste in the water, more bad things in the water. So that increases the oxygen demand. And very similar to this is dissolved oxygen. How much of dissolved oxygen is there in the water? And dissolved oxygen will be more in the water when the biochemical oxygen demand is less. Clear? Then fecal coliform. It's basically a bacteria that can cause you to have dysentery. Right? It's kind of a bacteria, and it's an indicator if fecal coliform is less. It is always there. So some parts per million we talk about it. So that's an indication of how hygienic the water is. Last article, Ayush helped 59,350 farmers in cultivation of 84 hubs. Okay, how did the Ayush help? And when I say Ayush, we basically refer to Ministry of Ayush. 84 hubs. So it is basically part of a centrally sponsored scheme of National Ayush Mission. Right, so it is under this National Ayush Mission. And who's responding? The Minister of Ayush. So the Ministry of Ayush has supported. So Ministry of Ayush is implementing National Ayush Mission. Now be careful. I referred to the Wikipedia. Of course, everybody refers to Wikipedia. So there it said the parent agency is Ministry of Healthcare and Family Welfare. I refer to certain other this thing also. But to me, Ayush is a distinct ministry. It should be under Ayush. So here it reads also. Okay. So National Ayush Mission, what does it do? So here is the points, the things that they are focused upon. Better access to Ayush healthcare services, improvement in Ayush education, and reducing the communicable and non-communicable diseases using Ayush systems of healthcare. And Ayush has multiple branches of medicines, not just Ayurveda, but Siddha, homeopathy, etc. are also part of this. So here is the mention Ayush, Ayurveda, Siddha, Suvarigpa, this is with the Tibetan medicine system, Unani, and also homeopathy. Unani is coming from basically the Greek word. Right then. So this essentially concludes our daily news analysis. So thank you for streaming in to IASPrimers with me, Shubhashish. Bye bye, take care and all the best.